The BBC can't really win in this scenario. They do have a responsibility to report on not just outsiders' allegations, but specifically any allegations that come from within the organisation. Obviously, it was very sad to hear that Huw Edwards was taken into hospital yesterday. I guess, I mean, I would have hated to have been in that meeting to make the call, you know, do we go ahead with it, do we not? But ultimately, they have to be shown to be, you know, telling on themselves in this scenario.
Yeah, but I'm confused because I'm sure yesterday there was something said along the lines of, this has come as a huge shock to the BBC. So, Tim Davie, it's a big shock to you, but one of your own journalists was doing an investigation into one of your own journalists for some bad behaviour, but none of the bosses knew about this. It doesn't add up.
A lot of BBC apologists are saying, you know, this has come as a bolt from the blue. You know, Huw Edwards, you know, worked for the BBC 40 years, never heard a bad word about him. What a stunning, shocking thing to happen. Well, that's just not true. There have been rumours about Huw Edwards for a very long time. And I guess with the heritage of Newsnight, of course, they were the ones who investigated Jimmy Savile. They take it upon themselves to try and clean their own house. So they have been investigating Huw Edwards before The Sun got onto the story. And, of course, this has, as they say, produced boiling fury from other journalists. But what I do find surprising, maybe ironic, is that The Sun, of course, has been leading the way on this. By the way, a completely legitimate story in the public interest. They've been leading the way, but because of Huw Edwards' condition, he's in hospital with serious mental health problems, they're laying off. They announced we won't be doing any more of these stories, and that's out of respect and fear for Huw's welfare. The BBC is now, despite his condition, they are chucking him under the bus relentlessly.
And what's I still find, to go back to that Tim Davie interview, the one he did with Radio 4, where we discovered, and it was confirmed, that it was 7 weeks before they spoke to Huw Edwards. So they had a complaint come in. It came because of the story in The Sun, and they waited 7 weeks, despite the fact, and one would assume their investigations team, which he said are an amazing team of people, in his best Danny Dyer kind of voice, they would surely have been aware then, or somebody would have been aware, that there's an existing set of investigations into the man. A newspaper get allegations which are even more serious, if that's the right way to frame it. And yet it still took 7 weeks. I mean, this is still a mess for the BBC. And you've also got, just a final point, you know, you've got this strange, you know, the BBC, it's not your mum and dad for those people who work there. There shouldn't be a loyalty on this if we're dealing with this kind of subject.
Well, the BBC absolutely cannot do right for doing wrong in this situation. Of course they should be cleaning their own house. Of course they should be investigating anybody in the organisation that's doing anything that's untoward, that's bringing it into disrepute. If they didn't do that, it would be seen as they weren't doing anything. They were sitting on their hands. If they didn't report on Huw Edwards, it would be seen that they were looking in the other direction. But I don't agree with them chucking him under the bus either. But what this is clear of, and I said this last night, is that there is a clear problem with the culture in the BBC, that first of all, people didn't feel that they could come forward, you know, didn't feel they could come forward until they left. We always have to think of the people in the middle of this, not just Huw Edwards and his family, but the young people involved in this, the staffers who have left the BBC or who are still there, the other young people who got messaged on whatever social sites, whoever they are, they're in the eye of this storm as well, plus their families. And we always have to think about them when we're talking about this too.
There are alleged victims in this. This is a counterintuitive thing to say, but I've been thinking about this. Huw Edwards joined the BBC when he was about like 2 years old. No, you know, it was
40 years ago.
In his 20s. He's been there for 40 years. There are BBC lifers. BBC's full of people who've been there 30 years, 40 years. You turn up at 25 and you stay for the rest of your life. I don't think that's healthy. It institutionalises them, and that's why we have this kind of parallel universe of the BBC, the world according to the BBC, and the rest of us. And they see themselves as highly trusted, brilliant, churning out amazing programmes. And we're going, we don't trust you, and your programmes are crap. You know, it's a strange dichotomy between the BBC and the nation it's supposed to serve.
But also, there's you know, I get the fact if somebody has a mental health condition and, you know, you have to respect that somebody's going through it. I get all of that. I don't know whether whether the suggestion from his wife's statement is that his behaviour was because of his mental health condition. My guess is that the mental health condition got worse because it was all rumbled.
The last few days.
In the last few days. I mean, John Sopel had previously talked about speaking to him, and he was very angry about what was happening. Not that he was very sick or he was very ill, but I just can't help but feel, if this was a sort of 1980s comedian that we were talking about, I'm not absolutely sure it would be this gentle in the way that it was being.
What about if it was a Tory MP?
Yes.
Or a Tory MP?
Well, you know,
I don't think...
If he was having mental health...
I was hearing Alistair Campbell, talking about, in those kind of tones, and I thought, I don't imagine you'd say that if it was...
I'm with you on the Tory MP thing. However, let's just not forget that there's a lot of people within the Tory party at the moment who haven't even been named and are, accused of far worse things than what Huw Edwards has been accused of.
That incredible statistic. There are currently 58 MPs under investigation for inappropriate sexual
of all
behaviour.
parties.
I mean, there's only 650 MPs. That's amazing.
In America, when the cops are being investigated by the cops, that's called the Internal Affairs Department doing it. Essentially, for BBC, that is Newsnight.
But
If Newsnight are doing that and they're investigating Huw Edwards, in my opinion, should have been notified about it and taken off television at that point, because the accusations that Victoria Derbyshire is saying that her team were looking into are as serious as everything else.
This organisation, the BBC, we've found out over the last few days, and it just seems to stumble almost laughably from one ridiculous serious crisis to the next. That's all the BBC does. And now we've learned about their systems, their protocols. This was an absolute disaster. The parents complaining and nothing happening effectively for 7 weeks. The Director General doesn't know anything about it till last Thursday. The Director General still has not spoken to Huw Edwards, and so on. It has no communication. It isn't worth £159.50 a year of our money to pay for that catastrophe.
It's worth double that.
It really isn't. It really isn't. They've got to get their house in order. This has to be their wake-up call. If Savile wasn't a wake-up call for them,
and it
incredibly, what will be?